This loser has never seen the sunlight, but when he is suddenly thrust into a medieval world with summoning powers, he receives a second chance to finally step outside and touch the grass. This story begins when our protagonist's favorite game shuts down all its servers. With the game offline, the protagonist realizes he will have to touch the grass if he doesn't find another game to complete that takes 10 years. So he starts looking online for a hardcore game and ends up finding one that claims to have no ending. With his interest already piqued, he feels he is facing a true challenge, so he chooses the highest difficulty, Hell mode, and also the hardest class, Summoner. However, the moment he hits play, the computer literally absorbs him into the game world, reincarnating him as a newborn. His father is happy to learn he has a son and names him Alan. Alan receives a lot of love from both parents and feels grateful, even though he was born into a poor farming family. Over the following months, he learns that he is in a rural village where most of the people farm the land and pay taxes to the feudal lord. Alan's father, Raiden, is a farmer, and his mother, Teresia, is a housewife. As they are both in their 20s, Alan believes he will soon have younger siblings and can hardly wait to be part of a larger family. One night, remembering the basic cliches from Ezekiel, Alan uses the command Open Status Window. It works, but instead of a holographic menu, appearing, a grimoire shows up, making Alan panic. He quickly uses the command Close Status Window before his parents enter the room and pretends to be asleep. After ensuring everything is safe, he summons the grimoire again and begins to flip through its pages. The first page shows Alan's attributes, and as expected, all are at the lowest level. The next page details Alan's summoning ability. As he reads, he discovers that he is already capable of summoning insects and beasts of rank H. Suddenly, the book begins to glow and turns to a new page on its own. It is a message from Elmia, the creator of that world, explaining that the Summoner class is still in beta testing and apologizes if Helen experiences difficulties due to the chosen class. Helen doesn't care about the message and proceeds to try to summon an insect. However, no matter how many times he attempts the incantation, the summoning magic simply does not work. Thinking of a solution, Alan realizes that he may need to create the creature first. So, he creates a ranked insect card. But just as he is about to summon the beast, he notices that his mother, Teresia, is, approaching. Therefore, he pretends to sleep again, but ends up actually dozing off. The next morning, early on, Hayden goes out to chop wood while Teresia begins washing clothes. With both occupied outside, Alan seizes the opportunity and uses the insect summoning spell, causing his room to fill with glowing spheres of spirits. Fortunately for Alan, his mother notices nothing, so he quickly continues. When the spirit spheres condense again, they manifest in the shape of a grasshopper the size of a cat. Upon seeing the creature's furious expression, Alan wonders if it will obey his orders. Nevertheless, he decides to try and, with his weak baby voice, commands the insect to fly into his hands. However, the insect turns away, making Alan question whether it is foolish or something like that. He suspects that the reason the grasshopper is not obeying is that he has not yet fulfilled the necessary conditions. So, he checks the grimoire and looks at the grasshopper's status window. He chooses the name Dina for the green insect and examines its attributes. Upon discovering that this small insect grants +1 in endurance and agility, Alan lets out an incredible on impulse, which causes his mother to enter the room. Upon seeing the ugly insect, Teresia feels disgust and instinctively crushes it. Despite this accident, Alan continues to test his summoning ability whenever he can, and on one day decides to summon a beast. A white rat appears, and, as expected of a rank H beast, it is as dull as a door, just like Dina. Even so, Alan names it Mouse and examines its attributes. Discovering that he has a skill called Scurry, Alan is able to activate this skill by making the mouse run quickly around him. This leads him to think about the kinds of powerful monsters he will be able to summon and control in the future. For now, he can only create a total of 10 summoning cards, so he creates 10 rat cards. As a result, his attack attributes receive a bonus, thanks to the effect of the mouse. With this increase, he can already chop wood easily, despite being only 1 year old. Still, Alan feels that it's not enough. This leads him to think how much easier the game would have been if he had chosen a different difficulty, making him regret selecting Hell mode. Roden returns home covered in blood, which makes Teresia worry, thinking he has hurt himself. However, Roden assures her that he is fine, explaining that he went hunting for a wild boar. Before that, Roden asks Alan if he would like to see the boar they hunted. Alan eagerly agrees, and Reeden carries him to the spot where the beast is being butchered. On the way, they see a flock of birds called alba herons, which are the size of dinosaurs. Because of this, Redden refers to them as monsters. Roden tells Alan an interesting fact. saying that his name was inspired by these birds, hoping that he too will live freely and be able to fly wherever he wants in this world. Alan ends up falling asleep in Roden's arms as they walk. When they finally arrive at the location, Roden wakes him up and shows him the great wild boar. Upon touching it, the first thing Alan thinks about is how powerful that monster is, doubting whether he will ever be able to defeat a creature of that level. One of their neighbors, Gerda, approaches Roden and praises him as the star of the day. The other villagers present also compliment him, as a victory of that level is not something just anyone can achieve. Thus, everyone acknowledges how well he performed. Gerda then notices Alan and comments on his black hair and eyes. Alan responds to the greeting, and Gerda is shocked to realize that he can already talk at just 1 year old. She remarks that Alan is growing up much better than Kreda, her daughter, who is practically the same age. He asks about the great boar and how strong it is. Gerda explains that the great boar is a rank C monster, something that one person cannot defeat alone, requiring about 20 men to bring it down. This gives Alan a good basis to evaluate himself and think about how he can become stronger. 10 months pass quickly, and Alan is now 1 year and 10 months old. He continues training his skills and realizes that he can now summon rank G monsters. Additionally, he can also fuse rank H and G monsters. He has rank H and G monster cards, so he checks his cards and attempts to use his new power, but receives a notification that his MP is low. He assumes the issue is hunger and goes to eat. He devours a huge plate of food, leaving his parents visibly worried, but immediately returns to his room to test his powers again. When he tries to fuse the cards once more, it doesn't work again. Low MP. He thinks about creating another card, but the warning repeats. In the end, he ends up giving up for now. 3 years pass, and Alan is now 3 years old. He has accumulated enough strength and MP, and finally manages to fuse 2 cards. He fuses a rank G card with a rank H one and obtains a GH card. Then he summons a pet. From that, he successfully manages to summon a rank G bird and feels excited. The bird, which he names Chepe, has level 2 in agility and strength, as well as the ability to mimic voices, which makes Alan believe he can use it effectively against enemies in battle. He goes outside with his new pets. The first is Hop, a small bird that only hops. He asks Hop to jump, thinking of using this move to distract his opponents. The second is Mole, a pet with the ability to dig. He asks Mole to dig, and the pet opens a hole that Alan imagines using as a trap against enemies. While planning his imaginary life, he ends up falling into the hole that Mole dug. This brings him back to reality. He is still just a child and cannot even fight against anyone. It's 3 in the afternoon. This only adds to his worries. He hears a voice that makes him uneasy and knows exactly whose voice it is. It belongs to Kreda, Jerta's daughter, who came to play with him as usual. They play fighting games every day, so they grab their wooden swords to duel. Kreda is much faster than he imagines and possesses immense strength, completely dominating the reincarnated protagonist. After hitting him repeatedly, without him being able to defend himself, Alan falls to the ground defeated and loses the match. His parents arrive, and Teresia's belly is already as big as he had predicted, which means a sibling is on the way. Teresia and Redan ask Kreda to go home, and they return as well. During dinner, Alan suggests to his father that he would like to accompany him to the farm to help with the harvest, since his mother is pregnant and cannot assist. Rodan declines the offer, and Teresia insists that she is still strong enough to continue. They appreciate Alan's help with household chores, but they emphasize that he is still a child, and a 3-year-old boy should not be working on the farm. To Alan, he already possesses the strength of an adult and could lighten his parents' burden. Still, he understands that no parent would want to subject their child to something like that. Teresia tells him to keep playing with Kreda. They comment on the fighting games among the children and how skilled both of them are. Rodan mentions that, with the skills they have already demonstrated, he can hardly wait to see the results at the evaluation ceremony. Alan doesn't know what that means, so Rodan explains that upon turning 5, there will be a ceremony where they will discover what skills they possess. If they receive good skills, they will be able to free themselves from servitude. Rodan also comments that he has seen Alan throwing stones at the tree outside and asks why. Alan lies, saying it's because he was told there are monsters out there, so he wants to throw stones to protect his mother. In reality, he has been throwing stones to check if he has any other abilities besides summoning. The next day, he practices his summons and realizes he has reached a point where he can summon all day without getting tired. He also watches his aunt Dansa, but he gets distracted when Kreda shows up. They go to the usual duel, and as always, Alan loses and falls to the ground. Rodan arrives and Teresia goes to greet him. Unfortunately, Dana jumps on her, startling her. She recovers from the shock, but suddenly feels strong pains in her belly. Her water breaks, and the baby is about to be born. Rodin tells Krita to call his mother, Matilda, while he takes Teresia to bed, trying to help in his own way. Alan boils water and goes to announce that the water is hot, and coincidentally, Matilda arrives at the same time. She orders the men to leave the room and helps Teresia with the delivery. The men nearly fall asleep outside the house when Teresia finally gives birth, calling them back, full of excitement. Alan now has a brother, and Rodin names the baby Mex, which makes Teresia question if that is not also the name of a monster. Eden replies with a smile, showing that she is right. Seeing the excitement on everyone's faces, Alan begins to wonder why he was reincarnated, putting aside the fact that he was just a gaming addict wanting to level up in a new game. In his previous life, he was no more than a lonely workaholic, living miserably. There was nothing about that life worth missing. To be honest, he loves the idea of his new family. For now, all he wants is to free his family from servitude. Teresia calls him to greet the baby. He approaches to see the child, who immediately starts crying. Alan is terrified by this, and everyone jokes, saying that babies are like that. Alan is undoubtedly enjoying his new life. Now all that's left is to cross his fingers and watch him grow. Time passes, and now Alan is 5 years old. He asks his father how the evaluation ceremony works. His father explains that it is a special event that everyone, from servants to nobles, is required to participate in when they turn 5. If a servant has talent, they can be freed from servitude. But that's not easy since there are many rivals. Since they colonize the lands, many babies have started to be born, and therefore, many children are about to turn 5. Krita calls Alan so they can go together to the evaluation. Upon arriving at the evaluation city, the children are impressed by the number of houses. Krina comments that she wants to be a shin sword so that she can join the knights in front of the evaluation site. A large crowd gathers. Alan notices that the other children who are already there are much better dressed than he is. The doors open and 3 hooded figures appear, asking for Omea, the god of creation, to bless everyone so that the children may achieve good lineages. They mention that once a child who was a servant became a hero, and everyone is shocked by this information. One of the hooded figures explains that Clazes, the Holy One, was a commoner, and Dverg, the Lord of Swords, was a servant. Alan remembers that in the game, classes like Hero and Lord of Swords should start from a low social class, and that apparently the game settings still apply in that world. Thus, he understands why everyone needs to undergo the ceremony. They begin to enter the church and stop in front of the statues of the gods worshipped in that world. Upon seeing the statue in the middle, Alan realizes that it is Elmaya, the god of creation. When he received a letter from the developers, this name was mentioned in it. The evaluation begins with the chief's son. At least he is instructed to place his hand on the crystal ball, and any talent he has will appear written on the metal plaque behind him. The boy approaches the crystal ball while his father is ecstatic about the result. He puts his hand on the ball, and it reveals that he has a talent for being a merchant. The father is happy, as this is excellent news. Alan realizes that having a talent is a reason for celebration. Alan invokes his grimoire, which no one can see, as the way statuses appear in the grimoire and on the stone is different. The next boy touches the crystal ball, but nothing happens, and he runs crying to his father. The following boy slaps his own face twice to motivate himself, and again the crystal ball glows, revealing that he has talent as an axe wielder. The evaluation continues until only Krina and Alan are left. Krina is called and runs toward the crystal. She places her hand on it, and the crystal shines brightly. His father worries and asks the Reverend what it means. The Reverend says it's a miracle, for she has received the talent of Lord of Swords. Everyone is surprised, as she sells a small village. His father is beaming, and Alan thinks that this is the only way to justify her absurd strength. Soon it's our protagonist's turn. He walks up to the crystal ball, thinking that now everyone will know that he is a summoner. He places his hand on the ball, and it glows very faintly, but suddenly, the glow disappears. Alan wonders why it vanished, and suddenly the ball glows intensely, blinding everyone and throwing the protagonist to the ground. His father rushes to him and asks if he is okay. Alan replies that it was nothing, as Krana has made him go through worse things. He asks the Reverend what his talent is, and the answer is that he has no talent. Alan runs to the stone and notices there is a text error in his talent. He calls the developers useless, as they can't even fix their own game, and that because of this, everyone will think he is someone without talent. His father hugs him to comfort him and says it's better to go home, as his mother is waiting for him. When they return, Alan's mother hugs him. Later, inside the house, his father says that talent is not something important, and that Alan will always be his pride. His brother also comforts him. Alan thinks that even though they are a poor family, he is very happy to have been born into that family. While lying down, he summons his book and adds his cards to it. Remembering that all his statuses are at rank I, he realizes he is the only one there playing at super difficult level. Everyone at the ceremony was 5 years old, so they should all be at the same level since the ranking system likely reflects the amount of growth. Thus, the only reason all his attributes are at rank E is that he chose Hell level, where progress is only 1/100th of normal. A regular person would be tearing their hair out, but for him it's all fine because he's going to put this weak game in its place. Still, he feels a bit down remembering the text error in his skill and goes back to complaining about the developers. The next day, Alan and his mother are walking, and he asks what is wrong with his father. His mother says that he has been like this since the night before when he came home. We then see a flashback to the previous night when they went to Krina's house to celebrate her becoming a Lady of the Sword. Helena asks Alan if he knew that a Lady of the Sword is even better than a Shin sword, and he replies that he didn't, even though he knows the truth, but he needs to act foolish. Krina's mother comments that the village chief stopped by earlier and left them a celebratory liquor as a gift. She hands the drink to her husband to open. Roden congratulates with a grim expression, and Gerda says that the guests should drink first. Alan even thinks his father is jealous of Krina for being a Lady of the Sword, but he knows he isn't that petty. Roden tries to fill Gerda's glass, but he refuses, saying he won't drink anything while he has that sour expression on his face. The two start to fight, and Roden asserts that Krina has an incredible talent and that it is a reason to celebrate. Gerda, irritated, asks why Roden wants to sever ties with his family, shocking everyone with this revelation. Roden says that Krina's talent is extraordinary and that she has a chance to join the cavalry and serve the country. If that happens, she could become a noble and should therefore not be socializing with servants. Alan realizes he is saying this to prevent Gerda's family from having to ask for help, but the fight continues. Alan asks Krina to stop the argument. She grabs her sword, but before she can act, the mothers put an end to the fight by hitting both of them and making them quiet down. Alan asks if they always fight like this, and Matilda confirms, explaining that after they became parents, they matured a bit, but before that, they were very explosive and would exchange punches all the time. His mother explains that the four are childhood friends, grew up in the same village, and that 10 years ago, a rumor about a new village emerged. They decided to move there and worked hard to build their own houses. She comments that the houses have the same design because of this, as they found it easier to build them at the same time. Since they didn't have an infinite workforce or supplies, Gerda laid the support beams, Roden built the walls and the floor, and Gerda took care of the roofs. They fill their cups with liquor, and Roden comments that he hasn't drunk since his wedding. The same goes for his friend. They drink, and the next day, one of the villagers informs Gerda that the Order of Knights is coming to see Krina at her house. Krina and Alan practice fencing, and then head to the city to see the Order of Knights. People comment that a Lady of the Sword is just a child. The boy with the axe asks what Alan is doing there, since he has no talent at all. Krina interjects, saying that Alan is stronger than him. At that moment, the knights arrive and everyone steps aside. The captain of the knights, named Zeno, is a master swordsman. He speaks with the village chief, who calls for Gerda and Krina. They approach the knight and the captain asks if she is the master swordsman. Krina then introduces herself. For his part, Alan thinks it would be sad if they took Krina from the village now that she is a master swordsman. However, suddenly, the father gets upset and explains to Zeno that his daughter has never wielded a real sword and that she is barely 5 years old, so what he is proposing is madness. Still, Zeno replies that if she is a master swordsman, everything will be fine, and they must conduct the test. Otherwise, it will be considered that they deceived the knights and the village chief, and manipulating the evaluation ritual is a sin punishable by death. Alan feels that the situation is becoming strange as Zeno orders the vice captain to prepare, as they need to check if the girl truly has this gift, and for that, they must hold a sword duel. Everyone in the village is surprised as Gerda begs the captain to reconsider. However, Zeno makes it clear that if Krina doesn't fight, they will execute them both. At that moment, a knight positions himself next to Krina. Seeing the sword, she asks if she can take it. He confirms, and an excited Krina informs her father that she's going to fight, almost giving him a heart attack. Then, there is a scene change, and Krina finds herself in front of the vice captain of the knights, who introduces himself as Reborn. The fight begins, and Krina, without wasting any time, charges at Reborn, surprising everyone by showing that the small girl can wield a sword of that size. The problem is that when Reborn gets serious, he kicks her against the wall. Gerda tries to intervene, but the knights prevent her, as they do with Alan and her father. He feels frustrated because, although Krina has a great gift, she cannot compete with the actual experience of the vice captain. However, Krina gets back up and starts to unleash an aura from within herself. The vice captain becomes nervous nervous, and Krena quickly advances towards him, who can now do nothing but defend himself. He realizes that Krena has an extra skill, and then the little girl, with a sword strike, breaks his weapon. Zeno calls off the fight, while Krena, very smiling, thanks the vice captain for the match, commenting that he is quite strong for an old man, even though in reality the poor guy is only 24, even younger than me. For her part, Gerda is surprised to realize that her daughter is a true master swordswoman, and starts patting the knights' heads as she picks her daughter up. Krena begins to laugh. At that moment, Zeno approaches and says he recognizes Krena's power. He apologizes for his discourtesy, although Gerda continues to show irritation. Still, Zeno mentions that now it is time to talk about her future, and informs that, if she wishes, her friends can accompany him already to the chief of the village's house. Alan notices that Gerda is still furious, which is quite understandable. However, he wonders what the hell the axe guy is doing there. His thoughts are interrupted by Zeno, who introduces himself again and warns that he is there by order of the lord of those lands, who wished to verify that the ritual had not been manipulated. He comments to the village chief that normally the village takes the chief's name, but since a master swordswoman was born in this place, the lord of those lands now wishes for the village to be named Krena. The village chief accepts without any complaint. Zeno then reveals that 3 years ago, a master swordsman was born into a count's family. Someone finds this curious and, while stealing some fruit, thinks that master swordsmen can only be born among plebeian servants. Zeno continues telling that this master entered the service of the royal family, but his performance was unsatisfactory. When they repeated the ritual, they discovered he was merely an ordinary swordsman. Because of this, they uncovered that several nobles had tampered with the results of the gifts. Thus, the eye. Royalty began to doubt the results of the ritual. For this reason, Zeno apologizes again to Gerda for having put her daughter to the test. Gerda accepts the apologies as Zeno reveals that Krena will enter the academy when she turns 12, to later serve the royal family. At that moment, the boy with the axe asks if he can become a knight if he goes to the academy, causing his father almost to have a heart attack. He hurriedly apologizes to Zeno. At that moment, Zeno notices Alan's black hair and eyes. Rodan comments that he is his son, while Gerda introduces her friend. Surprised, Zeno stands up, asking if he is the boar hunter. He apologizes for his rudeness, saying he barely greeted the hero of that village. Rodan asks why he calls him that, and Zeno reveals that the lord of those lands is delighted to receive, every winter, the meat of the giant boar that the village sends. He knows Rodan takes great risks in hunting them, so he congratulates him for his excellent work and hopes he receives praise from his esteemed lord. Rodan accepts, shakes his hand, and later bids farewell to his friends. As he walks back home, he comments that if a servant like him can gain recognition from others, then, even if life is very hard, they must continue to live, with their heads held high and with dignity. Alan understands this. After all, his difficulty lies in the way he lives. Before going home, he reveals to his father that he has a gift for his mother and for Machu, and wonders if he perhaps should not have done this. But then, his father starts to laugh and reveals that he did the same. Alem finally manages to increase the level of his summoning skill. He opens his stats and sees that he has gained the ability to enhance, which means he can now make higher level summons and has also unlocked rank F creatures. He wonders if he still needs to fuse cards to get new ones just like he did with Chepe. He also wonders what the next type of his summon will be and starts to daydream, thinking he will be able to summon a dragon. His slot capacity for storing cards has also increased, from 20 to 30. He thinks it has been 2 years since he leveled up his summoning skill, and he is eager for night to come so he can try out his new ability. At night, at home, he offers to wash the dishes because if he finishes the chores quickly, he can secretly try out his skill. His brother asks if he's going to get a sibling. His father responds that it could be either a brother or a sister since they can't tell yet. Teresia thinks it will be a girl, and Rodin says he will start thinking of a name, but his wife interrupts him, reminding him that he said she could choose the names for girls. He apologizes and asks if she has anything in mind. At that moment, Alan's MP returns to maximum and his book appears. When he opens it, Alan accidentally reads the name Elmaya aloud, and his parents scold him because one must not take the Lord's name in vain. He apologizes and tries to change the subject, saying that his old scar has grown larger. Rodan explains that this happened because he passed the judgment of the gods during the boar hunt. Alem asks what this judgment is. His father explains that it is a special moment that happens sometimes during the hunt, causing a sudden burst of energy that eliminates all injuries and exhaustion. Alem thinks this must be how they describe leveling up in that world, and that his father is an experienced boar hunter. He can't see his father's stats, but he bets that his level must be pretty high. Alem knows that, even with his summoning skill leveling up, he is still level 1 since he never gains SP. For that, he would have to defeat some monsters, but servants are not allowed to leave the village, except for hunting. He asks his father to go hunting with him, but Rodin declines, saying that it is very dangerous and could cost lives. Alan agrees and leaves. Later, lying in bed, he thinks about the message he received earlier, as he suspects he knows what it is about. He had sent several toxic messages to the administrators, and upon checking, realizes he was right. They fixed the problematic text and also his statistics. He believed that all were ranked due to the slow increase in Hell mode, but seeing his actual statistics, he is shocked. He has rank S in MP and Intelligence, and he has the same number of rankings as Krena. He is happy to have been rewarded for his effort. Furthermore, he opens the skill book and begins to enhance Denka, noticing that the creature's stats have increased, specifically those that grant buffs. However, the buffs given to him remain unchanged. He decides to see the improvements and summons Denka. Just by appearance, he can already tell that its power is greater, and this proves that the role of summoners is more than just bringing monsters to life. He is pleased with this, but his mother walks into the room and suddenly comes face to face with Denka. She panics and steps on it. The next day, his father is going out to hunt, and Teresa bids him farewell. Alan, distracted, approaches thinking that after going through a summoning cycle, he has learned that the enhancements of a card do not disappear. This means that as long as he has spare MP, he should enhance all the cards in his inventory. His mother calls him to say goodbye to his father. He bids farewell and wishes him a good day. While he is hanging the clothes, he thinks that every day he has tested various combinations, but he still hasn't managed to unlock any new types. The only test he hasn't done yet is Insect F with Bird F. He tries and finally succeeds, unlocking a new grass card rank F. He is a bit disappointed with the rank, but seeing the buffs, he is happy because it comes with an MP buff, which is very good for him. Thanks to this buff, he will be able to do a lot more throughout the day. At the current pace, it would take decades to reach the next level, but this card could reduce it by a few years. He decides to see what the card is capable of and summons it. An apple appears, and he names it Apo, saying that clearly he was not made for fighting. In the summoning letter, it states that his ability is aroma. Alan asks him to use his ability, Apo. Then he enters the ground and a seedling grows. Alan smells the essential oil and thinks that the dull backyard is now closer to becoming a botanical paradise, but he comes back to reality remembering that he is not a gardener. His mother approaches with his brother, calling him for lunch. He asks Apo to return, but nothing happens. His mother asks what that seedling is, and Alan makes up an excuse, saying he doesn't know, while wondering what the issue is with Apo. Afterwards, he goes to practice fencing with Krena and is again defeated. However, Krena praises him, saying that he has gotten stronger. Alan thinks that his sword mastery has reached level 3, and that besides that, the inventory expansion has allowed more space to increase resistance and attack. He wonders if Apple's aroma has any effect in battle. Later, we see Alan throwing stones at a tree. In his thoughts, he has thrown more than 20,000 times, but there is no sign that his ability will evolve. His brother Mesh asks when they are going home because it is very boring. Ever since their mother got pregnant, Alan has been responsible for taking care of Mesh and helping his mother with chores. He thinks it is better to focus on increasing his summoning level, as it is not worth trying to boost his throwing skill level. Still, he continues throwing, believing that the next throw might level him up. At that moment, his brother asks what those trees are. Alan explains that he did some tests and discovered a few things, mainly about Apple's ability. The aroma he produces can reduce MP recovery time, which is quite useful as it allows for even more physical activities. At night, Alan mentions to his mother that his father is late, and Teresa wonders why he is delayed since Radan had said he would be working nearby. At that moment, Gerda shouts for Radan to hold on, as several men carry Radan on a wooden board. Teresa and Alan run to him, while Gerda warns him that he is home with his family. He explains that Radan was badly hit in the stomach. Gerda says they only managed to keep him alive thanks to a healing herb called Flor Muller. Teresa is shocked, as it is something very valuable, but the man explains that he received it from the knights as an apology for what happened to Krena, and that without this flower, they would be doomed. One of the helpers says it was the fault of a stupid peasant. They are outraged and want to make the peasant pay. But Mexi Accorda goes into the room and starts to cry. Alan takes him inside, and the helpers leave. Alan asks Gerda what really happened, and he explains that a few days ago he received a summons from the village chief. He wanted them to let the peasants participate in the hunt because wild boar meat is valuable to them, even though most of it goes to the baron. The leftovers are divided among the hunters. Despite this, no peasant had ever volunteered for a hunt before because it is very dangerous, and there are casualties every year. But the servants make a living this way, so there is nothing to be done. Alan asks why the peasants decided to participate this time. Gerda explains that it was because they heard there was a hero among them. He remembers that the captain of the knights, Zeno, called Rodan a legend in front of everyone, and for that reason, the peasants thought they would be safe to join the hunt. Neither he nor Rodan felt comfortable with amateurs accompanying them, but since it was a direct request from the village chief, they couldn't refuse. To make matters worse, a day before the hunt, there were people who didn't want to practice seriously. When the day of the hunt arrived, they gave the peasants the easiest part, to attract the wild boar's attention. However, at the decisive moment, those who had not wanted to train ran away, breaking formation, and one of them fell while trying to escape from the boar. Rodan tried to defend the peasant and was hit full on. Before leaving, Gerda asks Teresa and Alan to stay strong for Rodan since it will still take him some time to recover. Alan feels it was pointless since he didn't even try to help. He decides to spend the whole night by Teresa's side, taking care of Rodan all the time. In the early morning, Rodan suddenly wakes up, quite agitated, and Teresa immediately embraces him, relieved. Upon seeing him conscious, he stirs and rushes to embrace his father, while Alan simply observes, questioning what he has made of his own life. He had been completely focused on becoming stronger, but power means nothing without purpose. For those people, this is not a game. They are doing everything to survive in such a cruel world. He needs to protect his little brother and the other sibling who is yet to come. At this moment, Gerda returns, bringing part of Rodan's meat, as she promised, and is happy to see him awake. Rodan says he still feels very ill, but Gerda asks him not to worry, assuring him that she will make sure his family is well cared for during the winter. He asks his father to rest and let him take care of things, promising to keep his family safe. Everyone is surprised by his determination, but Alan decides to prove his words through actions. He starts working, carrying heavy things, which impresses the other servants greatly. Alan has decided that it is time to stop pretending, since there is already a rising heroine in that village named Krina. So, there's no problem if a talentless servant like him draws a bit of attention, because family comes first. Teresa thanks Alan for bringing the water, saying it must have been very heavy to carry. Later that day, Gerda teaches him how to pick potatoes, and Alan surprises her with his strength. Gerda admits that he is even stronger than she imagined, and Alan assures her that he inherited it from his father. When they finish, Alan complains that the Baron takes more than half of the potatoes after all their hard work. However, they will still need other things to survive the winter. At this moment, the village chief suddenly appears with an offer of fruits, saying he heard that Rodan is already recovering. Teresa politely thanks him for his generosity, and the commoner responsible for the incident quickly apologizes, saying it was all his fault. Alan glares at him with anger, as a mere apology. Won't fix anything, but Rodan forgives him easily and asks him to be more careful next time if he wants to continue hunting. The commoner takes his words very seriously, and Alan is impressed by how magnanimous his father is. On the other hand, Teresa stands firm and warns the plebeian that this mistake almost cost her husband's life. The plebeian acknowledges the error and accepts her words, but before he can say anything else, the other servants arrive to see. Rodan finally smiles and asks everyone to calm down, as he is still recovering. Alan is simply amazed, realizing he has the best parents. The next day, he decides to create a large area to conduct experiments. When he finally finishes, he summons Hopper, and a bunch of colorful frogs leap onto his face one after another. As a second step, he sets several traps and hides nearby, making sure he's out of sight. After that, Alan calls the frogs using his provoke ability. They begin to hop around the traps while changing color. Alan knows this is the most cliched trap there is, but if he can catch about 50 ducks or wild birds, his family will be able to survive the winter. After a while, Alan gives up and admits that this isn't working, so he decides to rethink everything. However, just as he says this, he gets excited seeing a wild bird approaching. Alan realizes it's not just any bird, but a dangerous albagoron. The monster starts devouring the frogs, and Alan remains hidden, as he didn't expect the provoke ability to attract a rank B monster. It is the monster that his name originates from, and it seems quite strong, so Alan knows that his best option is to flee. Before leaving, he notices that his skill has leveled up to 2, allowing him to increase the attributes of plasma creatures from 10 to 20. So, Alan thinks it's worth a try. Alan charges at the bird with his wooden sword, but the albageron quickly knocks him down without hesitation. Alan summons Fido, as his chance to use his summons in real combat has finally come. Unfortunately, the albageron eliminates all of his summons and strikes him with even more force than before. At that moment, Alan realizes he is losing the bonuses from each summoned creature that is defeated, which is weakening him. This is a major inconvenience of being a summoner. Thus, he starts to realize that this could be the end for him. And with that, episode number 3 comes to a close. If you enjoyed it, remember to subscribe to the channel and comment "final" to show that you made it this far in the video. Continuing the fight Alan calls Chus, they stick to the monster's neck and begin to suck his energy. This way, Alan manages to free himself, although he is very weakened now that he has applied the buffs. He can call the pots and choose to attack, and with a blow to the head, he can knock him down. The grimoire appears warning him that he defeated an albaeon, and having 100 experience points in addition, he celebrates saying that it was more satisfying than he imagined. Then he goes to his family to tell them about this feat, taking the albaeon with him, although he lies saying that he captured it in the sky. Everyone is amazed, but Mash starts crying. His father asks his son if he wasn't hurt, and he replies that he's fine. Gerda is impressed that he captured that, using just a wooden sword and stones, but notices the dog bites he has and asks if he was bitten. Alan replies that he isn't sure because he was very concentrated. Gerda simply believes him and tells Rodan that he will take care of bleeding the creature. At that moment, Alan sees the bump that Gerda has and imagines what belief hit him, but finally details after that Gerda takes Alan to help him with the albaeon. Gerda tells that of the 60 kilos that he weighs after being bled, only 20 kilos remain. Only half of that is edible. However, the wings have a lot of value, and he thinks it's very kind of him to tell. Although Gerda also comments that 60% of the beast will stay with the boss. This rule also applies to wild monsters of excess rank and such as horned rabbits and albilones of rank D. Then we see Gerda remove the magic stone from the beast. These stay with the boss since they are of no use to them. But back to the important point, a child captured a beast while Rodan is still there injured. So maybe it would be possible to negotiate something with the village chief. This gives Alan an idea and he tells Gerda, so they go to the chief's house. They took the beast to him to tell him his story. The chief gets excited, but they ask if they can keep the beast. The chief replies that they can't, because the Lord of the Lands demands more and more meat. When he hears this, Alan assumes that this is the reason why. They allow commoners to marry, and Gerda proposes to hand over the feathers and the magic stone. But as this is not enough, he sadly tells us about the situation Rodan's family is living in. Beyond, he also enters the scene saying that he is hungry, and even faints as a result. They manage to convince the boss to let them keep the beast. But they go further by suggesting to keep the meat, while they deliver the feathers and the magic stone. Gerda reinforces, saying that it is not. Often that an alban is captured, the boss thinks that it must be very difficult to capture them, so he gives them permission to keep the meat with it resolved. Alan returns to the field to capture more albilones. He uses the plants as bait and tells the chews to drain their energy, then stuns them with a stone, tells the pots to bite, and finally he strikes with his sword, managing to hunt too. And he mentions that he hunts once every 3 days and that this is the first time that he has not lost any invocation. The grimoire notifies him of the experience obtained, reaching 1,000 of 1,000 and reaching level 2 beyond. He sees that his attributes will increase except his skills. But he already considers this a great achievement because finally after 6 years he achieved level up and decides to tell his family about it back at home. He shows what he hunted. Rodan is surprised, but also highlights that he managed to do it, and at the same time, Rodan realizes something, but avoid commenting. Suddenly they hear the bells, understanding that it's time to train with belief, so we see Beyond dodging, blocking, and receiving blows, all this while thinking about what you will do next to survive the winter. Dry the meat he hunted, and then exchange it in the village when he counterattacks. He takes the opportunity to think that he should use the presence of the albilones to kill 20 and reach the level 3. Although he finds it difficult to achieve this before the end of the year because of this distraction, he finds an opening and hits him with a blow, winning the after the fight. The girl says goodbye. Promising back the other day at night, we see Alan reunited with his parents, decided not to hide his secret anymore. He says that when he was 1 year old, he received a divine oracle. His parents are surprised surprised exactly as he expected. His father asks if it was the god. She and Alan confirm by quoting the words that divine being said to her, saying that he would grant her wisdom and strength. Teresia doesn't understand this very well, so the alien explains that apparently he is more intelligent than the others, and a little stronger physically. In addition, he was told that his approval would be tougher than that of 100 people. Combined, when he heard this, his parents lamented, crying out for mercy to the god Rodan. In turn, he asks if today. He overcame the first stage because he realized that the scar he had on his face disappeared. Alan is surprised that he had noticed, and then his father tells him that he has also surpassed his own approval. In the midst of all this, his mother asks about the result of the ritual. Alan responds that he received an oracle from Evil 2 months ago about this and that. His characteristics were classified as weak because his slow evolution was taken into consideration. Furthermore, the reason no gift appeared is because his is completely new. His father seems intrigued to know more, but Ellen replies that he still doesn't know, although it's a lie. He just apologizes to his father for lying, but he can't risk being labeled as a dangerous person if they see him summon creatures. At that moment, his mother approaches to hug him, very worried as she never knew how hard he worked to overcome the approval imposed by God. In the face of this, his father asks him what he intends to do now. Alan responds that he will continue moving forward. Rodan was already expecting this answer, so he asks him not to hesitate in asking help if he ever needs it, but he forbids him to tell this to others as they could consider it blasphemy against his God. Boasting out of guilt, the protagonist sees no problem with that and agrees. So the months pass. Now Alan finds himself cutting the meat of abalones together with Gerda, who comments that he always thought that he was not an ordinary child, but he never imagined that he would receive approval from his God. After that, we see them in the city walking with a huge bag of meat. They talk for a while and Gerda asks if those are your first purchases. Alan confirms. Gerda mentions that since the commoners no longer participate in the hunts, everything has gone better. Talking about them, Alan asks, what is the difference between them and the commoners? Gerda responds that if due to status and taxes, as commoners are not taxed at 60%, as they instead every year must pay 3 gold coins per adult and 1 per child. This calls the attention of the protagonist, who takes the opportunity to ask if it is possible to become a commoner. Gerda responds that it is possible by paying 10 gold coins, but that this can also be granted as a reward by the Lord of the Lands beyond. He does the math, reaching a total of 50 gold coins for his family. Then they arrive at a store where they exchange the meat for salt, then go to another stall fruits back home in the afternoon. The protagonist goes over everything he learned about prices, so we see that they return in the following days. Everything he learns. He writes down in his grimoire, discovering that a gold coin is worth 100 silver coins and that 1,000 copper coins are equivalent to 10,000 iron coins. And so with the prices of products, thinking that it would only be necessary to kill 500 albayalones to get his 50 gold coins, he then goes to another store to ask if there is any potion to recover mana, as there isn't. He asks for something that cures injuries, and the seller tells him. He points out some plants and then draws them in his grimoire. He also asks about the Muris flowers. The seller comments that he doesn't have them and that he couldn't even buy them, although he says he once had one. By chance, it was precisely the one he sold to Gerda last month. He remembers offering to receive it for 3 gold coins instead of 5 to save his friend. In the end, he ended up selling it anyway, thus losing 2 coins when he finds out what Gerda did for his father. Alan gets emotional and gives him some albayalon meat, saying that thanks to him, his father was saved, and that another day he will bring more meat. When he leaves the store, he sees a weapon that costs 50 silver coins. At that moment, the blacksmith's son appears accompanied by the chief's son. The first pushes him, demanding that he become his lackey. Alan gets irritated by this, but is not interested in a fight that doesn't give him experience, yet he draws his sword to scare him, challenging the axeman to draw his weapon and fight, who accepts the offer. Duel and tells the chief's son to watch them while he goes to get his weapon. He returns immediately with a shovel. The axeman fights very well, but does not reach the level of belief, and with an alien movement disarms him before leaving. He tells Dagora that he will come back to buy something and leaves. Leaving the furious in the afternoon, we see the father removing the bandages and boasting that he no longer has nothing. Teresia asks him to be careful not to get hurt again. Alan enjoys this family moment, watching everyone talk. The next day, he finds himself at Krina's house training with Dagora. While the dangerous Krina trains with her younger brother, and Alan realizes that with him she is holding back. Dagora tries to attack Alan by surprise. Alan manages to dodge, and Dagora ends up crashing against the ground at the end of the training. Everyone returns home at night. Alan and his mother take care of his brothers at that moment. His father Rodan and Gerda both arrive with worried expressions inside from home. They explain what happened. The Lord of the Land summoned them and decided to increase the hunting quota to 15 boars. This means that now the commoners will also have to participate. Teresia if opposes the decision, but Rodan clarifies that these are orders from the Lord of the Lands. Gerda adds something even more worrying. If they do not reach the quota, new servants will be recruited. Besides, he understands the problem well. With more servants, there will be less land for each family, and some may lose it if they do not meet the quota. In addition, Gerda warns that next year the quota will increase to 20 boars. Teresia considers this is absurd and too dangerous, but Rodan insists that the Lord of the Land doesn't care what their opinion is, and he agrees, saying that even if they meet the quota, the chief can increase it again, which only it would make the situation worse. When the Gerda criticizes the commoners for being useless, Alan agrees. But he claims that he can make them useful. He trusts in the wisdom that the god of creation granted him and asks that he be allowed to do so a few days later. Alan arrives accompanied by the commoners and other servants ready to act. One of the servants comments to Rodan that it took him a long time to recover. Rodan apologizes to them, but says that he is now as good as new. Another servant asks if Alan is really going to accompany them. He receives an affirmative response from Alan's father, who also says that they will use Alan's strategy in that day's hunt, but that his son is just going to observe and will not get involved in the fight. Alan thanks them for letting him accompany him, but he thinks he would like to participate in the hunt. However, his hard-headed father didn't let him. Even so, he is happy to be able to participate in the training of the newcomers to help the group hunt more boars, as he doesn't want to see his father like that again. The commoner goes to Rodan to apologize once again, but the man tells him not to apologize. Worry and focus on his role in the hunt, Gerda gives the signal and the portals open. Alan is enchanted by the sight, as it is his 7th year living as a servant, and it is the first time he has managed to leave the village. He sees a mountain called White Dragon Mountain, and every autumn wild boars leave the mountain and go close to the village to look for food. Some legends say that a white dragon lives there. He becomes even more excited because now it really seems like he is living in a fantasy world. However, he is soon taken out of his thoughts when a servant asks if he is already as scared, and for that reason he is not accompanying them to the hunting location. Rodan orders everyone to remain calm and go to their positions. The boar is attracted to the location, and Alan realizes that this is really scary. Gerda, leading the first team, orders everyone to stick their spears into the boar. Then they struggle to hold him back and shout for Rodan. Rodan, leading the second team, comes in the flank and begins to stab the boar in its vital points. Alan realizes that it is a good method and that therefore they managed to hunt so many boars successfully for 10 years, but thinks that it's a mistake to count on people they didn't even know to finish off the boar. He asks the commoners to take their positions. Rodan orders the attack and they thrust their spears into the boar, which falls. Alan thinks that just one attack from the commoners should be enough for them to gain experience, and he was right. They begin to feel the power flowing through them and realize that they are overcoming the first test of the gods. Alan is happy with the result and the fact that the boars are C rank. Even with a single blow, they must have gained a lot of XP. He summons his book to see if he gained anything, but realizes that he didn't, as he wasn't considered part of the battle just because he was close. The commoners go to him and they thank him for the advice, because it made all the difference. He says it was nothing, but he realizes that it is a bad feeling, because even though he won the battle, he was left with a bitter taste of defeat for not having gained nothing. The next day, one of the servants asks if he is going hunting, which our protagonist confirms. He asks the servant to speak to his father and let him use a spear, but he denies it. Time, saying that he can't do that because Rodan would punish him. The other one comments that he wanted to participate in the hunts too. His friend tells him to quit his job as a butcher and go with them, but he can't do this while his wife is pregnant, so he prefers to play it safe for now, but he's happy to have more monster meat to share. Alan calls him uncle and asks if he can ask for a favor. He takes him to his store of albirons and asks if he can carve the meat for him, offering 2 packages of meat for each albiron as payment. The man agrees and work begins at once. Alan thinks to himself that it is a good deal, as he does not necessarily need the meat, as this stock is for the sale of carcasses with which he intends to combine 50 gold coins to get your family out of servitude. Anyway, if you went to a butcher in town, it would be a lot more expensive, so it's not a bad idea to outsource the work on the day. Next, 2 more commoners were added to the job of hunting wild boars. They ask if this really is safe, which the blonde confirms. saying that they already did it once and asks them to relax. Alan thinks that if they continue to gradually add new people to the team, they will eventually have enough people to form 2 groups, which would greatly increase the number of boars that they would be able to hunt. And even so, he wonders why the Baron wants so many boars, as he has the impression that the territory is not suffering from a shortage of food, but comes back to reality when they shout that the boar has arrived. Gerda shouts for the front line to stick their spears and then asks the newcomers to advance to strike the boar. They also manage to defeat it, and the commoners once again pass the test of the gods and feel stronger. This time, even Alan gains the experience as he put Denka in front of the boar so that he would be crushed, making him participate in the battle. He thinks that, in this hardcore mode, any way of gaining XP is valid and mentally apologizes to Denka. 3 months later pass by and they are celebrating the new year. They were invited to the boss's house and were given sweets and gifts to take home. At home, their parents ask if they had fun at the boss's house. Alan confirms and asks why they didn't go. Gerda replies that she has no patience for that bunch of pompous people. So everyone eats and Gerda asks if the boss said anything about them. Our protagonist comments that the boss was very happy with them, and Roden says that if things continue like this, they will have no problems with the new quota of 20 boars. Gerda asks Alan if that next to him would be something special, and he responds that it is an alcoholic drink that the boss gave him as a gift. Gerda and Roden start to smile, and Alan realizes that they took the bait. Drink, but the boy claims it's a gift from the boss for him. Gerda tells him not to make a fool of himself, as everyone knows he's not old enough to drink. At that point, Alan says they can stay with the drink if they beat him in a competition. Gerda accepts immediately, but Roden asks her to be more patient, as they are talking about Alan. Then Alan says that if he wins, he wants to participate in the wild boar hunts. The two realize that they have fallen right into his trap. Gerda asks what the challenge will be, and Alan replies that it will be arm wrestling. Confident of victory, Gerda offers to go first. Before starting, Alan looks at his library and highlights that he has used all available attack power buffs, so he doesn't believe he will lose. Without hesitation, he places his hand on the table. Both position themselves, and, at Karena's signal, the duel begins. At the beginning, Gwelda was winning with a lot of confidence. However, Alan starts to give his all, increasing his strength little by little until he manages to turn the game around. At the end of the duel, Alan recognizes that was well contested and assumes that Gwelda's attack attributes must be between 150 and 200. After that, it's his father's turn. When he touches his father's hand, Alan feels the calluses, which makes him reflect for a moment, but so he doesn't intend to hold back. The duel starts off evenly, however. Upon seeing that his own son is giving him trouble, the father decides to take it seriously. Releasing all his strength and overwhelmingly winning, Alan just smiles, acknowledging defeat, but also confirming that his father's strength is superior, possibly 300 or more. Next to Alan delivers the liquor, which Gwelda and her father celebrate, and without wasting time, start drinking. Meanwhile, the wives scold them for being so rough with the child. Teresia, in turn, encourages Alan. The protagonist is confused, but imagines that his mother thought he was upset. Rodan also encourages him, saying that he is not weak, just that his father is too strong, and that therefore, he also won't be able to go hunting wild boar. Alan agrees to give up on this for now, but promises that one day he will beat him. After a few drinks, Gwelda gets drunk and demands that his wife bring more food. Matilda gets angry at the lack of respect and throws him to the ground, which surprises everyone, especially Alan, who assumes that her attributes are at level C. After a while, Alan realizes that his summoning level has increased, reaching level 4, in addition to the expansion of the spellbook, level 3, with storage. He also notes that he now has access to rank I creatures and new species, but you need to do a synthesis to unlock them. As you have a lot of mana, you believe you will be able to chain the summons together. Furthermore, you can carry 10 more cards. He mentions that the value of the blessings depends on the level of the summons, and that his attributes can skyrocket if he creates 40 rank I cards, so he can beat his father in arm wrestling. He also reads about storage and grimoire, which shows a hole for storing things. He tests by throwing a stone and sees a list of everything inside. Then he tries to store any object and discovers that there is no storage limit. He comments that knowing how many objects you can charging is vital in a game, and wonder why you have such a broken skill at such a low level. Normally you get special skills when you really need them, as that is the creator's intention. So, there must be a reason for him to have storage. Later he tries to summon an E-rank insect, but realizes that he doesn't have enough mana, even though he has already recovered it all. Then, the grimoire writes that to summon E-rank creatures, magic stones are needed. That's when he remembers the hidden bag. From inside it, he takes out a magic magic stone obtained from rabbits with horns. Now try to summon an E-rank creature. However, the library indicates that he still doesn't have enough magic stones, so he has the idea of putting them into storage. This time, it works and his insect appears, an E-rank butterfly. When he summons her, he notices that she is huge, but at that moment his mother appears. The butterfly hides behind him and she, in mind, telling the truth. His mother doesn't understand, comments that he's strange and leaves. This makes Alan relieved and he starts dancing. Another day, we see Alan being attacked by a beast that, in fact, is his own summon, an E-rank saber-toothed tiger. This creature grants him a buff of 10 for his blessing, making him twice as strong, and he names the tiger Tama. It then attempts to summon a bird, but nothing happens until he remembers to place the magic stone that appears in the book. This makes him think that he will need to accumulate tons of magic stones. In the afternoon, Alan tells his father about the rabbits. He is surprised, but does not believe that they are still there, as they made a ditch around the village a few years ago. This leaves the protagonist a little disappointed, as now they are not, you can get more magic stones. The next morning, while the others were training, Alan asks Pelmoas about the magic stones. He responds that they are small gems embedded in the monsters, close to their hearts and which are mainly used to power magical tools. These magical tools are objects that activate when used with magical stones. According to him, in the capital. In fact, there are many types of them. Furthermore, he adds that D and C rank stones can be useful for people in the capital, while E rank stones are basically rubbish and can even be found thrown on the ground. He walks a little and finds one on the ground, handing it to the protagonist. Alan becomes thoughtful, assuming that perhaps he needs to search the village after some time. With the help of some villagers, he manages to gather a large number of magic stones which he uses to create all available E-rank summons. Thus, he feels ready to test his skills. Suddenly, the wind blows and one of his cards flies out. From this card appears Hawkins' warning that a boar is approaching. The creature appears behind the protagonist and attacks him. At that moment, Vince and another card are summoned and heal their injuries. Then, when the boar is about to attack again, Papillon, the butterfly, intervenes, releasing particles that make the boar fall asleep. After that, Tama, the feline, appears and attacks the beast's head. They manage to defeat it. The protagonist celebrates, however. Another boar appears trying to attack him, but luckily the oil protects him, knocking out the creature. Finally, after defeating all the beasts, the protagonist celebrates victory, although unfortunately, everything was just an illusion created by his mind. Aware that all of this was just the result of his imagination, the protagonist comments that for the last 6 years he has been thinking about exactly how a summoner should be played, but now he realizes that this is not the right way lying on the grass, says the himself who needs to discover on his own how to extract the maximum potential from a summoner, invoking his creations. He highlights the function of each one. Those of the beast type are for attack, the insects to apply buffs, birds to collect and transmit information, plants for healing, and finally stone types just for defense. With this in mind, he exclaims that he possesses an incomparable army of creatures, a supreme power that makes him a stronger summoner, even superior to the Demon King. The next day, we see Alan, Roden, and Gerda at the boss's house. They ask why they were summoned. The boss says the Baron will visit them in person next month. Roden and Gerda are shocked. Alan thinks that it is not enough to increase the number of wild boars to 20. They will still have to put up with the Baron. The chief explains that the Baron was interested in observing the wild boar hunt. Gerda comments that he didn't. It was enough to increase the number of wild boars. Now the Baron wants a show and asks if the surprises will ever stop. Roden says that's fine with him, but he's confused as to why Alan is there. The chief explains that he will need someone to act as a tour guide for the Baron during the time he stays in the village, and he thought that Alan would be the best choice. Gerda asks why not choose his own son. The chief responds that unfortunately, his son is not suited to this task, and asks Alan if he can take on the responsibility of showing hospitality to the Baron. Starting with dinner the day before the hunt, our protagonist thinks that he is basically being asked to entertain the boss while he is in town. He understands the reason for the fruit, but thinks that this pay is very poor. The boss says that he heard that the hunts are being a success thanks to Alan's intelligence, and is sure that he can handle this job. The boy thinks that frankly he didn't want to deal with the Baron, but he probably won't have another chance to leave the village as a servant. It will take 10 years of hunting wild boars and boarding before he can reach the commoner status. His father says he doesn't have to accept it, but Alan thinks he can't let this chance pass him by, as the Baron might grant status as a gift, transforming his family from servants into commoners. Thus, he decides to accept being the Baron's guide. The knights and the Baron arrive at the village, and upon getting out of the carriage, the chief welcomes them. Baron Granville thanks him and asks that his daughter accompanies him. Already at de Bogey's house, Granville Granville thanks him for the efforts made during all these years to establish the village of Crana, as 15 years have passed, and there was no feud with more successful than that. The Baron apologizes for the increase in demand for wild boar meat, but says he could not ignore an order. Coming directly from His Majesty, the chief is surprised to discover that it was a direct order from the king. The Baron explains that, technically, yes. However, the fault lies with Viscount Carnell, who kept calling the king's attention to the wild boar hunts. The chief is frightened, and the butler asks the Baron not to change his tone of voice. The food is served and everyone starts eating. When the Baron bites the meat, it becomes impressed and asks the chef what meat that is. The chef has no answer, but at that moment, Alan apologizes for interrupting and explains that it is an Albaron dish made with thigh and liver, flavored with a mixture of herbs. Granville asks de Bogie if that is his son. The chief explains that he is the son of Rodan, the commander of the knights. Remember him, because his hair and black eyes are familiar. Alain then greets Zenoff and says he will be their guide during the hunt. The Baron is impressed by Alain's education and asks if his father is a former member of the cavalry. The boss explains that he comes from a family of servants. Cecilia starts shouting, asking why there is a servant in the guest hall. The Baron interrupts her and says that the servants are members of the manor and she can't treat them like animals. She then apologizes to her father. Zenoff tells Alan that he is looking forward to the next day's hunt and hopes that he will be able to explain the details. During the hunt, comments that hunting 20 wild boars in a year must be a difficult goal to achieve, and that, if they are having difficulties, the knights can take on the task. Cecilia says that it would be wonderful to see the knights killing a boar. The Baron states that after showing the basics, the knights can take responsibility for the hunt. Alan responds that it will not be necessary as 20 boars is an insignificant number, and they will have no problem meeting the quota. He also says that their performance during the hunt will convince them. The next day, the Baron asks Zenoff to take care of Cecilia if something goes wrong, and the commander accepts the task. The gates are opened and they go to the hunting location. Once there, Alan shows them the structure built so they can observe the hunt. They go up and the Baron enjoys the view. At that moment, the hunters arrive, and Zeno is impressed to see that some are even wearing armor. Alan explains that they made good use of last year's boars, and that the armor was forged with scraps of skin, bones, and tusks. The hunt begins, and 3 men run towards the forest. Alan explains that their function is to attract the boars to the places where they hunting, and that the main point is speed. Therefore, they only use light equipment. He asks them to be patient, as it may take a while to attract the boars. Until then, Zeno asks Alan how the swordmaster, Crana, is doing, as a tutor will be sent in the spring to help her study for the academy entrance exam. Alan thinks it's hard to imagine Crana studying for anything. At that moment, the first boar arrives. When he passes a certain point, the men in armor arrest him. Alan explains that the shields are made with 2 layers of the hardest part of the boar, of attack advances and gives the first blow. Soon after, the team with long spears appears. Our protagonist explains that this team is made up of less experienced members. Zeno really likes the way they are dealing with the battle. The boar is pierced by several spears and then is hit by the final blow, aiming for the neck, which is the best place to attack. Seeing this, Cecilia faints and everyone celebrates the victory. Zeno tells the Baron that they are not cavalry, but they are true warriors. The Baron comments that this way there will be no problem in reaching the goal. However, at this moment, more 2 wild boars appear running. The commander calls Lebrando to help him, but Alan says it won't be necessary, as they can handle 2 at the same time. Thus, we see the group contain a wild boar and slaughter him. At that moment, the Baron's daughter wakes up, but upon seeing that extremely bloody scene, she faints again. With all the boars already slaughtered, Alan declares the hunt over, although he admits who was nervous about that last double hunt. While thinking about it, the Baron asks if there are now 17 boars left to hunt. Alan explains that no, there are only 10 left. For 7 boars had already been hunted that year before the Baron honored them with his presence. The adults are surprised and comment that, apparently, the captain's knights are not even necessary. Alan thanks him for his words, and changing the subject, tells the Baron that he has 2 requests. The first is authorization to build 2 more shield walls to increase hunting efficiency. Second is the possibility of obtaining goods that are not available in the village, in addition to the authorization to sell liquor among the servants. The Baron asks why, and our protagonist explains that as more wild boars are hunted, there is a real concern that the abundance of meat will reduce its value in the village. Therefore, exchanging meat for imported liquor would help balance this, and he comments that the Baron will certainly understand. He adds that hunters need to risk their lives to be effective, and therefore, they need the liquor to maintain high morale. Captain Zeno considers the request fully justified, and the Baron promises to look into the request, then congratulates our protagonist for his excellent work that day. The Baron's daughter looks at Alan with arrogance and leaves without saying a single word. Alan is confused by the scene and wants her to return to her comfortable life in the city soon, hoping he won't need to see her again. Now, in the house from the chief, the Baron addresses Rodan, Gelda, and Alan. After what he saw that day, he congratulates them on their incredible hunting skills, and, as a good nobleman, decides to reward their deeds, hopes that they will be promoted to commoners. The Baron announces that he is elevating the two, along with their families, to the status of commoners, hoping that they will continue working hard. They are speechless and thank thee. At the same time, Alan celebrates because, no longer being a servant, they will now be able to hunt outside the village limits, and their first stop will be the White Dragon Mountains, where they intend to hunt dragons. Something more, any servant who has participated in the hunts for more than 10 years will also receive the same status, and it is up to them to decide who deserves it. So far, the king's request has been granted, but he remembers that you requested something else, wants to promote the village of Krena as an example for the kingdom. So, do you want to know the story of the hunts? Rodan and Guelda offer to tell it. It began in the spring of 13 years ago, when the 100 servants were relocated there to develop the land as part of the colonization decree. After 6 months, they had already cleared much of the forest, and it was close to autumn when a disaster occurred. A wild boar appeared out of nowhere and devoured all the food they had set aside for the winter. Many servants decided to cross the border and fight for food in their old villages, but that meant not returning. So Rodan took the floor and proposed hunting wild boars for meat. Everyone came together with what they had on hand and managed to kill a single wild boar for the Baron. It's a proud story, but they lost a friend when they defeated the boar. They overcame a test from the gods and their wounds healed, but their friend didn't survive. Rodan blames himself for this to this day, and that's why he protected that commoner in the past. The Baron regrets what happened, but recognizes that without Rodan, the village would not be what it is today. He asks Rodan to honor his bravery with another reward, being able to request whatever he wants. Alan suggests that he ask him color, but Rodan makes another request, that his son be allowed to work on the Baron's estate. He believes that Alan has a better mind than him, and that any work will be beneficial. Alan does not want to accept. But the Baron considers the idea. Even Sabas, the butler, thinks it is a good proposal, although it takes away Alan's freedom. So, the Baron decides to make him a servant of the Granville family. Nobody believes what she just heard. Cecilia says she doesn't want a servant in her house, but now Alan is a commoner. He tries to find a way to refuse, but he sees Rodan crying with happiness for him, and doesn't manages to deny it, accepting to work as a servant. On a new day, Therese addresses Alan, and the whole family shows sadness at his imminent departure. As he leaves, his friends also arrive to say goodbye. Sina asks if he's really leaving, and Alan answers yes, asking her to take care of herself. When he realizes that she's also sad, he proposes one last fight. Sina accepts, and they both shout their names in front of him, of parents. When the fight starts, the scene goes on the attack, but Alan blocks and counterattacks. The parents are moved to see him saying goodbye like that. They soon realize that Alan is having the advantage, and everyone is surprised. Then he reveals that he used almost all the magic stones he had accumulated and created 20 copies of Hawkins to increase his agility. While attacking Krena, thinks that soon she will study at the academy, and then he will enter the royal service, and perhaps they will never see each other again. Therefore, he wants to say goodbye in the best possible way. He swings the sword, neutralizes Krena, and wins the fight. Krena is surprised to have been defeated, but Alan suggests considering the result a draw, promising to decide victory the next time they meet. Krena accepts with a smile, which reassures Alan. After the duel, the farewells begin, and then Palomas and Dogora arrive. The latter gives a dagger as a farewell gift and walks away without saying anything. After saying goodbye to everyone, Alan leaves with his parents. On the way, his father asks him to make an effort and go far, and Alan promises that he will do so. After a few hours, they arrive at the Lord of the Lands, who is waiting for them with a carriage. Alan says goodbye to his parents and goes up, accompanied by the Baron and his daughter. He can't help but be sad, especially when he sees his mother falling into tears through the window. Upon arriving at the Baron's mansion, Alan is impressed by the size of the place. Soon after, we see Cecilia on Alan's shoulders, trying to get a fruit from the tree and complaining that he is very short. Suggests that she stand on his shoulders, and Cecilia thinks it's a good idea. However, he warns her that if she falls, she could break his head in half. She climbs up, and with effort, he manages to pick up the fruit. But when he bites into it, he says, "It's disgusting." Alan comments that fruits that grow on tall trees tend to be sour. Cecilia responds that even though he knew this, he didn't warn her and let her eat. Alan disguises himself, saying that he had forgotten Cecilia, then says that he wants to cleanse his palate with some fruit and tells him to go get it from the market. Suddenly, something appears right above them, and Alan asks if it is an airship, but Cecilia denies it, saying that it is a magical ship. Alan remembers seeing some tools powered by magical stones that Paloma showed him, like clocks and lights, but he's never seen anything even like that. Later, we see Alan waking up in a place that looks like an attic, full of cobwebs. He says he slept too well, that he didn't even care, compares it to sleeping in low-quality internet cafes. He smells an aroma and sees 2 plants. When he smells them, he realizes that they have the effect of reducing MP recovery for 6 hours. He starts the day excited, but his stomach growls and he goes to the cafeteria to have coffee. There we see several servants, and one of them calls Alan. He goes to the table and calls him chief servant. Raquel asks how things are going. Things with Cecilia. Alan thinks she is complaining, but responds that everything is going more or less. Raquel says that this is part of the life of a servant like him, because if he were just a messenger, he would require so much. Alan asks what exactly the difference is between a messenger and a servant. Raquel explains that senior servants include butler, housekeeper, valet, lady-in-waiting, and head of kitchen, while those of lower rank are layman, cook, gardener, servant, and maid, and all of them are formally considered part of the family. The messengers, on the other hand, they are just occasional helpers and therefore do not count as members of the family. Helen asks if the servants are really part of the family, and the boss confirms Helen thinks that was why his father was crying with joy, because the Baron was generous enough to make him part of the family, and he needs to be grateful for that. He serves Cecilia and thinks that he was not surprised by the simple meal for servants, but he thinks that the nobility shouldn't eat much better, and wonders if the Baron is one of those who doesn't like to spend a lot. Cecilia's mother tells Alan that he learned the basics very quickly and congratulates him. The protagonist responds that it was all thanks to the teachings of his elders. She really likes the answer and comments to her husband that his manners are far beyond what is expected of a servant. The Baron agrees. Despite him not having a talent, Alan realizes that the Baron investigated him, and upon hearing that he has no talent, Cecilia laughs at him and boasts about being a sorceress, a 2-star talent, saying that her older brother is a swordsman. But her father scolds her, as he has told her countless times not to boast about her talent. Her brother Thomas starts crying, as he is the only one without talent. The Baron tells him to calm down, as he will attend the Nobles' College in the royal capital. Thomas comments that he wanted to go to the academy like Mihai did, but the father denies it, saying that they only accept those who have talent there, and that, for that reason, he also went to Nobles' College, but he was happy to have gone, because that was how he met his loved one and built his life. Family. While his mother tells Thomas not to let this get him down, Cecilia looks angrily at Alan, who doesn't understand why the blame ended up falling on him. Later, the boss asks Alan if he is going out, and he confirms it, saying that he is off in the afternoon. When walking through the city, he thinks that it is a whole new world compared to the village. He sees the Adventurers Guild and runs until then, asking the receptionist if he can become an adventurer. She asks how old he is, and when he responds that he is 8, she denies it, saying that the minimum required is 12, which leaves Alan shaken, as he is doing this as a servant out of respect for his father. But he decides that he will not give up hunting monsters. He goes to the mission board to get more information and see requests for hunt rabbits, D-rank goblins and large frogs, as well as C-rank missions to hunt orcs and armored ants, with payment of 3 silvers. At that moment, an adventurer arrives and says that it is not a playground, and tells him to go home. Alan apologizes and says he's leaving, but stops and asks why some rewards don't have a specified spawn location. The adventurer explains that monsters without fixed location in the mission can be found in several places, and asks since when he became his teacher to answer. Questions Alan asks him to calm down, and asks how the monsters receive different ranks, promising to leave as soon as he responds. The adventurer says that the rank of monsters increases according to the distance from the city. The further away, the higher the rank, the highest level being the white dragon that lives in the mountains. Alan sees a B-rank mission and asks why no one hunts that monster, since the pay is good and the location is defined. The man with blue hair says that creature is very strong, and its speed is immoral, so they prefer to leave it to the knights. Alan is happy, because the adventurer is telling everything, and asks about the white dragon, as the reward has been available for a long time. The adventurer says he is extremely powerful, but there are huge deposits of mithril in the mountains where lives and some people are eager to mine it, making Alan realize that the mithril must be worth more than the reward for killing the dragon. Just then, 2 female adventurers arrive, calling for Raven, saying that they have already received the reward and that they should go to the bar. One of them asks who the brat is, and comments that few people have hair and eyes that color Alan, who was learning about monsters with the nice guy, thanks him and leaves. Then we see him running through the city, complaining about the cold, but knowing that he can't waste his day off. He goes to the entrance of the city and the guard asks for travel authorization. Alan shows the Granville coat of arms and the guard apologizes and tells them to open the gate. The guard asks if he doesn't need an escort, but Alan is so excited that just run away, because he waited a long time for that. He knows he shouldn't go too far to avoid attracting dangerous monsters and thinks that until rank day it's good to stay in one place and decides to test his ability to his creatures, summoning Hawkins and ordering him to pose. Then he asks him to walk 1 meter to the right and the bird obeys, leading Alan to conclude that with 150 points of intelligence, he is intelligent enough to understand orders. Realizing that he did not encounter any monsters on the way there, he summons 5 more rocks and asks them to use the AI skill to find monsters nearby, and they leave immediately. Finally, locate goblins. Combat becomes a strategic experiment. Alan summons multiple units, alternates attacks efficiently, and uses the dovetail to apply sleep to enemies, leaving them vulnerable. Victory is quick and yields 1,000 experience points at once. He concludes that efficiency is key. Goblins offer less individual XP than boars, but they are defeated much faster. Adjusts the radar to focus on groups of 5 or more within a 2-mile radius. At the end of the day, totals 5 hares and 80 defeated goblins, accumulating 16,000 Esper, increasing 2 levels in a single day. During the hunt, he discovers that Ajaya's sleep effect has a high success rate against goblins and can reach multiple targets at once, ensuring full control of the field. Also learns a limitation of the system, the level of magic stones. Defines which summons can be created, requiring varied stock. Excited, he thinks about continuing at night, but realizes a problem. His bird-type summons suffer from night blindness. Even though they are magical, they cannot see well in the dark, forcing him to end the quest. Hunt Alan panics when he realizes that he planned to use a fork as a guide to return, but the invocation is blind in the dark. He improvises using iron spheres that he had ordered. The investment of 60 silver coins proves useful for guidance and logistics. After 4 intense hunting sessions, he reaches level 12, following his strategy of gaining experience and reinvest in equipment. His routine begins to attract attention. The Baron summons him, praises his performance, and questions what he does on his days off, as he leaves early in the morning and returns in the afternoon. Pressured, Alan admits that he hunts magical creatures outside the city, justifying himself by being Rodin's son and having it in his blood. The argument convinces the Baron. Attention increases when the Baron mentions the rabbit with horns that Alan would be creating, revealing that he is being monitored. The boss believes that the boy is trying to domesticate beasts to sell meat illegally and advises him to stop. Alan clarifies that just discards the carcasses. An advantageous agreement then emerges. The Granville family will buy each meat for a silver coin. With official permission to hunt, Alan starts to profit, in addition to earning experience. He sets aggressive goals to achieve. At least 100 goblins and hunt horned hares to accumulate XP, magic stones, and money. During the hunt, his radar detects something moving a lot beyond normal range. When investigating, he finds a trio from the guild cornered and seriously injured. The elite refuses to abandon their companions. Unable to reveal their invocations, Alan decides to fight using only his own attributes. At level 12, with attack and speed above 300 points, he overcomes D-rank monsters without magical help and neutralizes the main threats, leaving only a weakened goblin for the adventurers to finish off. RVI is on the verge of death and the group no longer has the magical power to heal him. Rita goes into despair, but Alan uses the Herb of Life, a rare item generated by Mamataro. The effect is immediate, the bleeding stops and RVI stabilizes. Relief comes over the group. Realizing that Rita is also injured, Alan uses the herb. The adventurers are shocked when seeing something so valuable being used naturally. For them, it is a rare treasure. For Alan, it is just a resource of his system that he minimizes as something common. RVI, already recovered, tries formally thank Alan for saving the group, but the boy cuts off any attempt at ceremony. He says he is late to meet his daily hunting goal. And he doesn't want fame as a condition. For ransom, he demands absolute silence about his identity and abilities. In exchange, he accepts 100-level magic stones, and for adventurers, it's an absurdly high price, low for their lives. For Alan, it is the ideal resource to support his invocations. Raven promises to deliver the batch in a week. Alan transforms what happened into strategic analysis, compares the flower of Mirasa used to heal his father, Rodin, slowly with the herb of life, generated by Mamentaro, which cured him instantly. He concludes that the herb works with fixed and immediate restoration, being very more efficient in emergencies. He also notes that he received 160 experience points for the goblin killed, along with about 80% of the total value, realizing that the division of combat does not drastically reduce the gain. At the end of the day, you accumulate valuable information about healing and experience. The next day, we see the commander of the Xeno Knights having lunch at the Baron's house. He tastes the meat and wonders what animal it is because it is delicious. Cecilia replies that it is rabbit meat with horns hunted by alien. The captain comments that he expected nothing less from Rodin's son, then mentions that he heard that the Krina village had successfully reached its quota of 20 large boars. In addition, states that it is great news. Cecilia's brother asks why they are not eating wild boar that year since it is tradition to serve it during winter meals, and then he wonders if all boars were sent to the royal capital, remembering that it was the king who ordered an increase in hunting. The Baron reprimands his son, asking him not to be selfish, and he apologizes. In addition, he finds it absurd to imagine. Although the servants are eating more meat than a nobleman's own son, the Baroness comments that it really is a shame they don't have boar meat to serve, as this will end up harming the festivities of the year, and the Baron agrees, saying that unfortunately there is nothing to do. The son calls Alan and asks if he could hunt a white deer next time. The Baroness then scolds Thomas, saying that it is a very difficult task for Alan, but he still accepts the request, declaring that he will hunt a white servant for Thomas and Cecilia celebrate upon hearing that he will face the monster through them. The bird finds the white servant. He had already seen him from a distance before, but now up close he confirms that he is really huge, so he decides to act strategically. He summons the colorful frogs to attracting the monster's attention. The frogs begin to jump and croak, immediately drawing the attention of the servant. Irritated by their presence, the servant fixes his gaze and advances with full force, and ends up falling straight into a previously prepared trap. When he sees that his plan worked perfectly, the alien cannot hide his satisfaction, and then finishes the white servant and takes him to the gate of the man's house. As soon as the Baron arrives, the guards and servants panic when they see the huge monster and begin to scream that there is a creature invading the mansion beneath the servant's body. Alan asks them to take him to the Master Thomas soon after he comes out from under the carcass and complains that it weighs a ton. Shortly after, the Baron arrives accompanied by his personal butler, and Thomas appears shortly afterwards, impressed by the size of the prey. Thomas thanks Alan, who humbly responds that it was nothing. The Baron then comments to Sebas that he doesn't understand how an 8-year-old child managed to defeat a C-rank monster, and asks him to investigate again if Alan really doesn't have any hidden talent. Sebas agrees. Later that night, Sebas talks to Alan at the mansion and asks if he would like to officially become a hunter. Since his recent actions have been worthy of that title, he explains that the role would have two objectives: hunting monsters to provide food for the Baron's family and protecting the city's inhabitants from attacks. Basically, he would be a hired hunter by Baron. Alan thinks he could just hunt monsters every day and still call it work, which would be perfect for him. Sebas asks if the offer doesn't please him, but Alan accepts immediately, saying that it is excellent. After all, it would be enough to meet the meat quota and have the rest of the free time to cultivate goblins. Something better than that would be impossible. He accepts the title, and he says he will start the next day, but Sebas interrupts him and clarifies that no one said he would work as a hunter every day. Alan is shocked. Naturally, he is still a servant of the law of Cecilia, and in addition to his duties as a waiter, will only act as a hunter about once a week. The alien's expression of disappointment gives away his thoughts, and Sebas says he can cancel the proposal even if he wants to. Alan denies it and states that he will humbly fulfill all his duties. The new year arrives and we see a gigantic ship up close, something that Alan considers a true spectacle. Cecilia. She asks Alan not to tell her brother that she prepared cookies for him because she wants to see his surprise, and Alan agrees. Soon her older brother disembarks from the magical ship, and Cecilia runs to hug him. Welcoming Mirai, he asks her how she's been, and she replies that it's been great, except for missing him, remembering that he broke his promise to visit her during the summer holidays. Mirai apologizes. While Alan observes that the two seem to get along very well, Mihail looks down on him and comments that he must be very talented at this moment. Alan remembers his own parents and brothers, hoping that they are well. Shortly afterwards, we see Alan slaughtering a giant and colorful rooster, and commenting that with that he has already completed his quota. He returns to the mansion and delivers the meat to the head of the kitchen, who is impressed by the variety, even highlighting the large frog that he had requested. The chef comments to Alan that Master Mihai is on the training field dueling against Xeno. Curious, Alan goes there and finds the two in full combat combat, exchanging quick and precise blows. Alan thinks it is the first time he has seen Zeno fight seriously with his sword, and realizes that even so, Mihai is managing to stand firm against him. After an intense sequence of attacks and defenses, Zeno interrupts the duel and declares that they will consider it a draw. He praises Mirai, saying that her skills are much sharper than the previous year. Mirai respectfully thanks for the compliment. At that moment, Cecilia sees Alan and approaches, while Mihai comments that he still thinks the fact that he hunted that huge prey is impressive. Then Mihai asks if Alan would like to train a little with him. The Baron, who is also watching, confirms with a nod, and Zeno does the same soon after Zeno hands a sword to Alan, signaling that the training can begin, and thinks that he didn't train with anyone else after he separated from Kriana, and looks at his statistics but thinks that after he started hunting monsters once a week, he went from level 13 to 20, and bets that he can win the duel begins. And Alan advances on Mihai, thinking that he has to be careful not to hurt him. But Mihai defends the blow easily and starts to counterattack with very fast attacks. Alan increases his speed too and thinks that Mihai is very fast. He tries several attacks, but she can't hit any of them. The Baroness is scared of the duel, but Zeno asks her not to be scared because Mihai spent a whole year training in the renowned city academic, and there is no chance of him losing to someone with no experience. Right after Mihai takes the sword out of Alan's hand and wins the duel, Mihai praises Alan and now understands how he became a servant. So soon Facida runs to his brother, praising his brothers. They say he is much stronger than last year, and Mihai comments that he cleared a dungeon alone, and that's why he's stronger. Mihai says that life at the academy is difficult, but it's worth it. For example, he had the opportunity to learn the ins and outs of verge fencing the Sword Lord, and everyone is shocked besides thinking that he cleared the dungeon and even trained with the Sword Lord, and he progressed 100 times faster than Beyond because he is playing in Hell. Mode the Peace asks when Mihai will return again, and he thinks it will only be next year in the summer again, and she is sad and asks them to train again when Mihai returns, and he accepts, but asks him to take care of Cecilia and shakes Mihai's hand, but thinks he's crazy to stop being Cecilia's servant so he can just hunt every day. But everyone keeps asking him to. He defends her. And he is thinking of a way to get out of this job without embarrassing his father in the process. A few days later, Mihai leaves for the academic city again. It's been a while and now it's April. The Baron receives the Viscount at his house. The Viscount says it's good to be there because every now and then it's good to enjoy the picturesque landscapes of the lifeless hinterland. Mocking Baron Alan serves some meat to the Viscount and remembers his boss explaining that the Viscount is in charge of the ugly neighbor on the other side of the White Dragon Mountains, that he has a higher social status. From Baron, Helen asks the reason for this sudden visit, and the boss says he doesn't know. So the Viscount bites the meat. He thinks it's excellent and says that this is the famous wild boar meat, and the Baron confirms furthermore. He thinks that the Baron knows very well that that meat is from rabbit with horns, and that he himself did not want to waste the boar meat with that Viscount. Furthermore, he remembers that it was the Viscount who drew the king's attention to the boars. Right after eating all the meat on the plate, he asked for a second portion, and the alien said she would serve it. We see the explanation that the White Dragon Mountains are full of mithril deposits. There are several mines in the territory, including on the Baron's side, but the dragon is on that side, so they don't have access to this mithril. And that's why the Grainville fiefdom is going through an economic crisis. The boss explains that the dragon is a bit inconsistent and changes sides every 100 years. So about a century ago, it was the Carnal fief that was in trouble. The Baron asks what her talent is, and the Viscount responds that she has no talent at all, and he thinks that it doesn't make sense that he went there just to announce that his own daughter has no talent. The Viscount then comments to the Baron that it's a shame because 2 of his 3 sons received a talent. The Baron stands up angrily and declares that his eldest son also has a talent, and that as nobles they must fulfill their duty. Alan continues without understanding why they seem satisfied with the absence of talent, since for commoners and servants receiving a talent is a source of great happiness. He asks if there is any disadvantage for the nobles soon after the Viscount leaves, and Alan thinks that being noble really sucks on his day off. He goes to a tavern with a group of adventurers he saved the other day and asks if they can share knowledge about C-rank monsters because they want to start hunting them, and they think they have defeated almost 10,000 goblins, and that is why there are almost none left in the region, besides already having leveled up to a level where hunting D-rank monsters is no longer efficient. The white-haired adventurer says she has an idea and asks him to go shopping first. Being in his first adventurer equipment store, he is looking for something that won't hinder his range of movement. The adventurer with the white hair shows him a skirt, while the one with the hair, Rosa, presents a cape, saying that it may seem fragile, but it is very useful. Soon after, we see Alan running towards the forest, thinking that now with his new armor he is much stronger in. Then his bird appears, signaling that he found a monster. Hanksy Alan goes to the place and finds an orc sleeping. He thinks it's his lucky day. He summons the Tama, and several Tamas attack the orc. Alan believes that the damage will be enough, but the orc fights back and defeats several of them and summons more Tama squads that attack again until finally defeating him. He gains 1,500 experience and is satisfied, then removes the magic stone from the orc and celebrates, but remembers that he needs to keep his feet on the ground as he was defeated by Mihai and feels that he is growing 100 times slower than normal people. Then his bird signals another C-rank monster beyond. He goes there and finds an armored ant. The creature notices him. He summons the Tama squad, but they can't do anything against the carapace, being defeated instantly, and then summon Papian to make the ant sleep and manage to put it to sleep, leaving its vulnerable part exposed when it attacks. With the sword, he realizes that it is as hard as steel. The ant wakes up quickly, and the alien goes into despair, attacking repeatedly until finally defeating it. Gaining 3,000 experience, he tries to break the shell to get the magic stone, but it is extremely resistant. He thinks that the ant grants more XP than the orc, but it is much more difficult to beat and concludes that it would need fire to melt the hull later. We see Alan and Cecilia in front of an elderly man. Cecilia asks if he really wants that as a reward for completing a year as a servant, as he considers it a bad reward. But Alan confirms that it is exactly what he wants. The old man asks if he has any questions, and Alan gets straight to the point, asking if he has the ability to cast spells. He asks the alien to place his hand on the crystal to check his aptitude. Alien puts his hand, but nothing happens. The old man concludes that he doesn't have what it takes to use magic, and then thinks that the summoner class is a complete joke, and this is how the episode ends if you made it this far. Comment on the word magic so I know you saw it until the end.